Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO Tekken Tag series, The Port Authority, where I take a look at some of my favorite arcade games of all time and compare them against their home console ports. And today we have Sony PlayStation's version of a Soul Calibur on Sega Dreamcast, because we're going to be taking a look at Tekken Tag Tournament on the Namco System 12, as well as the PlayStation 2. Because to say this game got a slight upgrade going from the arcades to home consoles would be an absolute understatement. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But honestly, I remember first seeing Tekken Tag Tournament in arcades in Vermont, and I definitely enjoyed the ever-loving hell out of it because I had pretty much all of the Tekken games at home on PlayStation 1. So I was definitely expecting this to come over to PlayStation 1 as a direct port with a little bit of a graphical downgrade because it ran on the Namco System 12, which was an up-spec PlayStation 1. And I think that's what pretty much everyone expected, but just like Soul Calibur on Dreamcast, they actually waited a console generation and came out with Tekken Tag Tournament at home on PlayStation 2. And the massive leap between the PS1 and PS2 is instantaneously noticeable. This is just such a better, faster, prettier game than its arcade counterpart. This is one of those few games where the arcade port actually got completely quote-unquote embarrassed by the home port, just like Soul Calibur, because Namco basically took the entire game and rebuilt it from the ground up with brand new models, graphics, background stages, and otherwise to show what the PlayStation 2 could do hardware-wise, and it totally worked. This is just absolutely night and day difference between the Namco System 12 version running on PS1 hardware and the PlayStation 2, and I would say this is probably the #1 graphical leap in generations ever, going from PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64 to Dreamcast, PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox era. It was just absolutely wild. And you can see here, just right off the top, the models have so many fewer polygons on the PlayStation 1 version. That's just because it couldn't push anywhere near the amount of polys the PlayStation 2 could. All of the backgrounds are flat 2D as well, and you get this infinite plane on the ground, which has a couple different stages to it. And I'm not saying Tekken Tag Tournament on the Namco System 12 is an ugly game. Far from it, it's one of the prettiest PlayStation 1 games around as far as the arcade is concerned. But this exactly is a PlayStation 1 game. There is no question about it. And while the frame rate and fluidity are 100% exactly what you need for a fighting game, and the entirety of Tekken Tag Tournament is in and of itself an awesome extension of the Tekken formula, this was kind of feeling a little bit antiquated on its year of release because the PlayStation 1 hardware was definitely getting a little bit long in the tooth. So it makes total sense that Namco would sit around and wait for more powerful hardware to bring it home, because they probably saw diminishing returns accounting-wise on the sales of Tekken on PlayStation 1, where Sony had a brand new shiny box that they were marketing to everybody, and pretty much everyone wanted to get a hold of it and see what it could do. So Namco intelligently held the game back until you get to PlayStation 2, and that's how you end up in a situation like this, the exact same stage, but it looks completely different and so much more impressive. You have the background with those pseudo real-time lighting effects on them. You have that entire crowd of characters there, which looks like an FMV video overlaid on top, but I'm not sure how they're doing it. And of course, all of the character models have so many more polygons. These are completely rebuilt from the ground up. Sure, they're keeping the animations, but they are brand new models, and they look quote-unquote lifelike compared to the PlayStation 1. And of course, that same sense of fluidity and fighting engine is still here intact, so it is still the same Tekken Tag Tournament you loved in arcades, but now with a completely new shiny coat of paint that just makes this game look absolutely that much better. And it is just wild. If you actually take this thing into PCSX2 and dial up all of the performance options on it, you get an even better result, leaving it like something that would be on a day one release for PlayStation 3. But that is the power of PCSX2, and that really isn't a fair comparison. I am doing these things stock to stock, spec to spec, that way you get a sense of what you'd be seeing, but it's always fun to talk about the differences. But I will say, in some strange ways, I can prefer the PlayStation 1 Namco System 12 version over the PlayStation 2 version. This Hong Kong back alley here with that green sort of lighting casting across the characters, and that green, that cast is a very PlayStation 1 aesthetic. It's a vibe that only PlayStation 1 can bring, but PlayStation 2 can't. So in some select stages here, there's something about the look of the PlayStation 1 version I like slightly better than the PlayStation 2, but it is very few and far between where I would say that. And of course, same game's going to have the same soundtrack, so I'm going to give you a sound sample of the same stage. First, we're going to do the Namco System 12 hardware, which was ROM based, then we'll move over to the PlayStation 2, which is optical media. But go ahead and listen and tell me what you think.
Tag battle. Fight. Tag battle. Fight.
Of course, the PlayStation 2 version is going to have the edge in audio quality because it has optical media with almost unlimited storage space at this point in time. The amount that they could fit on them was absolutely wild in comparison to arcade ROMs, but I do like the arcade version as well. But again, side by side, PlayStation 1 on the right, PlayStation 2 on the left, this is just wild to see how big of an upgrade this was. This is on the same level as something like Soul Calibur going across from the arcade board to the Sega Dreamcast, but if I did have to give the edge to one game getting more improvements, I would say Soul Calibur on Dreamcast is a prettier game than Tekken Tag Tournament, and it has more improvements visually than its arcade original. But you tell me down below which game looks good to you. Do you like Tekken Tag Tournament better or Soul Calibur better? I feel like the Dreamcast is going to win this round though. But that is the fun thing about doing these comparisons, especially across generations. You can see it's the exact same game, but it has a completely different new look to it, and that's always fun. We didn't get that many of these. More often than not, arcade to home console ports would go from more powerful hardware on the arcade side to less powerful hardware on the home console side. So actually straddling these generations and going from less powerful to more powerful is something that you don't find that often, but it's always so much fun to talk about. But again, what we really need to talk about here is the fact that these games are identical in the gameplay perspective. Yes, the PlayStation 2 version is going to have more modes, and of course it's going to have better graphics, but you can pick up the arcade original and then go to the PlayStation 2 version. It's the same responsive controls, it's the same basic moveset. You're going to be able to be portable across both versions, so you can play them the exact same way. I think that was a very intelligent design decision from Namco's developers, just to leave the gameplay mechanics alone, not try to improve on what people thought was perfection, but just enhance it and make it look all the better. And that must have been a big bummer for arcade operators when they realized their Tekken Tag Tournament cabinets were no longer the graphical superior option to play the game, but home users with PlayStation 2 could get a better than arcade experience, although that line would definitely blur when Tekken 4 came back to arcades running on PlayStation 2 hardware, so it kind of ping-ponged back and forth between which was the more powerful source to play Tekken, because that PlayStation 2 board in arcades is slightly more powerful than you'd have at home. And that's the really fun thing about arcade console hardware. A lot of consoles came into the arcades either as a base spec or an improved spec. Something like Namco System 12 is definitely pushing above what the home PlayStation 1 console could do, but other board manufacturers basically just took a PlayStation 1, shoved it in a box, and released arcade games on it. And the same thing was to be said for the PlayStation 2, because Konami literally put an off-the-shelf retail unit in an arcade board at one point in time. And that was just fun when they would crisscross their paths, because now today if you go into any arcade, every single game in there, if it's modern, is just running on a mid-range PC. It's nothing exciting, it is just PC parts, the same that you're probably watching this on right now. But for a good period of time there, you had home console hardware in arcades, and you had crossovers like Tekken Tag Tournament, because hardware was moving and evolving so quickly. You could have Namco System 12 one year, and then something like Tekken Tag Tournament just a little bit down the road on PlayStation 2. And as far as the Port Authority decision on this one, it's pretty obvious. If you want to play Tekken Tag Tournament today, unless you have some nostalgia for the arcade release, definitely play it on PlayStation 2. And if you want to make it look even better, pop it into PCSX 2, go into Vulkan rendering, and get everything up as far as the graphical settings are concerned. You can have a game that looks like it could have come out on PlayStation 3. But the only wrong way to play Tekken Tag Tournament is not to play it in the first place, because it is one of my favorite entries in the franchise, although still to this day I say Virtual Fighter did a better job of it, and DOA is probably tied with Tekken as far as my favorites are concerned. But you tell me down below, of the Tekken DOA Virtual Fighter competition, which one is your preferred? But yeah, this is just a fun comparison. The same game looking completely different across two different generations of home console hardware. But short of that, if you have any recommendations for new Port Authority episodes, leave them down below. But we're done, and I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.